Gentlemen, if your pelvic floor stretching hasn't helped or has made your pain worse, this might be why. Not every pelvic floor stretch is right for everybody. In fact, doing the wrong type of stretch, especially for your low back, can actually increase tension, irritate nerves, and actually worsen pelvic symptoms. So in this video, I'll show you a simple way to figure out which pelvic floor stretch your body actually needs, which one you should avoid, and what you should be feeling, and what progress should actually look like. I'm Janichi Swope, a men's pelvic floor physiotherapist, and when we talk about pelvic floor stretching, there are all kinds of positions, such as child's pose, happy baby's pose, deep squats. But sometimes what we have to consider is that the position you put your spine in during the stretch can change how your pelvic floor behaves. And more importantly, your low back preference often tells us which stretches will help and which ones might irritate things. Let's simplify this. Most people fall into one of two categories. 1. You feel worse during forward flexion or bending. Touching your toes feels tight, restricted, or painful. You feel an aching pull in your low back, side of the glutes, or even down the legs. And this brings us to an important concept known as peripheralization. This just means that symptoms spread further away from your spine on movement. That's your nervous system saying, this position might be irritating me. In many cases, this can be related to nerve sensitivity or compression in the low back. To know why we get these pulls, first we have to understand scleratomes. A sclerotome is an area in the body supplied by a single nerve root in the spine, and pain originating from these structures is often described as deep, aching, and poorly defined. Unlike sharp radiating nerve pain, which is a radiculopathy, sclerotomal pain is often described as a deep ache, feeling like a knot or tightness. In forward flexion, the posterior structures of the spine, such as your ligaments, discs, and joint capsules, are stretched, and if these structures are irritated, they often refer pain along their associated sclerotomes, which for the lumbar and sacral segments, which is your tailbone and low back, this heavily overlaps with the pelvis and groin. For men, the relationship between the lumbar spine and the pelvic floor is intricately connected. In chronic pelvic pain, irritation of the L4 to S2 sclerotomes can cause the brain to become more hypersensitive to these signals. A simple forward stretch can trigger a protective guarding response where the pelvic floor muscles involuntarily contract to protect the perceived threat in the spine or the pelvis. Specifically, sclerotomal irritation from the lower back can cause the levator ani, the deep pelvic floor muscles, to stay in this contracted state. Stretching into flexion while these muscles are on guard can increase pain rather than relieving it. In the forward bend position, there's often non-optimal pelvic motion during flexion, and instead of the pelvis rotating smoothly, it may lock or tilt abnormally to avoid triggering deep sclerotomal pain, leading to further strain on the pelvic floor. Usually we can see this in a forward bend test when the segments of the low back aren't flexing, and instead men tend to hinge at their hips. The second movement that men might feel worse in are those extension patterns. Standing upright or leaning back can feel compressive or painful. When you move into spinal extension, which is bending backwards, the posterior elements of your spine are compressed. And for men with pelvic pain, this mechanical stress can trigger referred symptoms. Similarly, irritation of the L5 or S1 sclerotomes during extension doesn't just stay in the back. So here's where it connects to your pelvic floor. If you're someone who doesn't tolerate flexion well, doing stretches that put you into more spinal flexion, such as the happy baby's pose, deep forward folds, or knee to chest positions, can actually subtly increase your tension into the system because you may be loading or irritating those nerves. Connecting this to pelvic health, the pudendal nerve is one of the key nerves that supplies your pelvic floor. If your lower back and surrounding tissues are putting tension on the nervous system, that can contribute to pelvic pain, genital discomfort, or tightness that just doesn't seem to relax. So if you're repeatedly stretching into positions that aggravate your nerves, you may actually be feeding into that pelvic floor tension, not reducing it. If flexion feels worse and extension feels better, or at least not worse, you'll likely do better with neutral or slightly extended spine positions. One exercise is a child's pose in 4-point with a slight anterior pelvic tilt, keeping a gentle arch in your low back and avoiding deep rounding. You want to visualize your pelvic floor lengthening as you gently rock your hips into your heels, and as you take a deep inhale breath in, you want to feel your pelvic bones widening. If flexion feels better, then flexion-based strategies like that happy baby's pose may be more appropriate. The same principles apply. we are trying to feel elongation at the pelvic floor, only this time our low back is positioned in a way that is more preferential. The biggest mistake I see as a men's pelvic floor physiotherapist are people forcing themselves into stretches that look right instead of choosing what their body responds well to. Your nervous system always gives you feedback. If a stretch feels achy or has that sclerotomal referral pattern that feels diffuse and unpleasant, that's a signal to adjust. A good muscle stretch should just feel like a gentle lengthening and separation at the muscle with no referral pattern elsewhere. If you're dealing with pelvic pain, tension, or symptoms that just won't settle, start by asking, what positions does my body actually tolerate? If you took something away from this, leave me a comment in the description box outlining your story, and click that like button so we can keep showing this to more men with pelvic pain. Thanks for watching.